Good evening. Good to see all of you. We are following up on this morning and giving the rest of our introduction to the book of Revelation. This morning we talked primarily about how to read the book and how to approach our reading of the book. And tonight we will go into a bit of the how we should see the scope of the book and the character and message, give you some familiarity of what the author is doing, obviously what God is doing through John in this message. So we'll see how that plays out. Probably spend maybe 30 minutes on that particular part. I'll stop then. We'll just have, if there's any questions and stuff, we'll address that at that particular point. One other thing I would love to cover tonight, not sure we'll get to it, but the one thing we have not talked about is what is this time frame in which these things in Revelation are being fulfilled. You probably noticed in the first three verses, he says these are things that must come to pass shortly, the time is near, and that sort of language is repeated a number of times in the book of Revelation. So we want to talk a little bit about that if we have the time tonight. If not, we will plan on that next week. All right, so first and foremost, let's just talk a little bit about what was just read. Joshua read to us Psalm 2, and you probably noticed in Psalm 2 that there is this major objection by the kings and rulers on the earth of Jesus being set as a king on God's throne, and God laughs at them. They're going to battle against God, keep that from happening. God laughs at them and says, yet I have set my king on the throne, and therefore you leaders and kings of the earth, you had better be aware of what the King Jesus will do to you if you do not submit to him. Kiss the Son, lest you perish in the way. Now that passage, of course, quoted in the New Testament a number of times, but that passage is a summation of what now is going to play out in the book of Revelation. God giving the culmination of an ultimate battle against the nations. Remember, this Psalm 2 text was quoted when in Acts chapter 4, when the apostles were threatened if they continued to preach in Jesus. And so they went back, they prayed to God, reminded him of this text, and said, give us boldness to step forward and do what we ought to do. So same kind of principle that we're going to see here in the book of Revelation. All right, so just a few things about that. The battle here is over the souls of men. We have two great kingdoms going on. Remember, Jesus refers to Satan having his own kingdom. He started his own kingdom. And we have two great kingdoms going on. These kingdoms are battling for people's souls. But it's important that we understand that this is not the battle between two despots. This is not the battle between two people two individuals who just want power. That's not the idea. This is a battle between wickedness and righteousness. Down through the ages, I think it interesting that this is what God is doing in Christ. In Psalm 110, Jesus, the Messiah, speaks this way. The Lord said to David speaks this way. The Lord said to my Lord, that is to the Messiah, when he points out, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. So here is God with enemies, and of course Satan and his angels creating this enemy relationship, not wanting to submit to God. And what is all that about? Well, I would suggest here that this comes from Satan's temptation. Please notice how this is mentioned in Luke's account of Satan tempting Jesus. Look at the words. The devil took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, and said to him, to you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me. So stop right there. Who's in control of the nations? Satan is. The dragon has taken control of the nations. Not against their will. The nations, of course, have given Satan that control, and Satan just says, I'll hand it over to you. As he goes on to say, I give it to whomever I will, and if you then will worship me, it will all be yours. So here then is this battle, again, over the souls of men. And there is then in the book of Revelation a number of depictions of this battle. I think the one that impresses me the most and maybe should hit all of our hearts is in chapter 6 and verses 9 and 10, when the souls under the altar, that is those who have been persecuted by the dragon and by the dragon's allies, they are under the altar and they say, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? 2 Thessalonians will say the same thing in chapter 1 of 2 Thessalonians. It is right that God bring about retribution on those who punish you and those who bring tribulation on you. God's going to repay this. We all live in a type of system. Even if we're not physically abused, we live in our hearts the same way. How long, O Lord? And that's what Revelation answers. How long? What are you doing, O Lord? And of course, in this particular case, God's answer is a little while longer till those more of your brethren actually die, and then I'm going to come and rescue you. So there is an avenging, there's a rescue that we all, those who are righteous, look forward to. And if God does not rescue, as David would say, you've put us all to shame. But I know you won't put us to shame. You're going to put the enemies to shame. So this is what this battle is about. We need to keep that in mind. This is not just a battle between two powers, not like an earthly battle would be. Okay? And then secondly, just to get in our minds the idea this is a war. This is a battle between not only God and the dragon, but between the offspring of Jesus and the offspring of Satan. And we read that in Genesis 3:15. That's the promise that would happen. There would be this battle between offspring. So not just God and Christ and the dragon, but also with us and the offspring of the serpent. In chapter 12, verse 7, he mentions now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. And of course, defeated by the resurrection of Christ. So I just want you to see the idea here and be familiar with, we're looking at a war. We're looking at a battle. And the battle is for the idea of the rule of God to save mankind from the wickedness of the dragon. We all for that? 18. We want God and us to be the winners. And that's what Revelation is emphasizing here. And then in chapter 17 and verse 14, he actually says this: at the completion of the destruction of Rome, he says they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called chosen and faithful. If you were to choose a key verse in Revelation, I would suggest this is it. This would be a good summation or theme key verse that would summarize what's going on in the book. There is a battle. They war against the Lamb, the dragon and his allies, and the Lamb wars back, and he wins the battle, conquers them, because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. Why is that important for us? I mean, you just make a good application right now. I don't care how powerful anybody is in the United States or any other country in the world. Wherever the kings of the earth are, Jesus Christ is king over them. And wherever the lords of the earth are, Jesus Christ is the Lord over them. And this book stresses that particular point. Okay? Now, let's just get a little picture now of how this comes about. God's victory comes about through a series of judgments, primarily three main judgment scenes are given in the book. And this so it's prelude to what we're going to see later. First, beginning in chapter 6, there's going to be a series of 7 seals of the scroll that are opened up. As these are opened, we see judgments that affect, catch this, a quarter of the earth. At the opening of the 7th seal, then we're going to see 7 trumpets sound. Trumpets give warnings of things to come. 7 trumpets sound. They will affect a third of the earth. And then out of that eventually come 7 angels carrying 7 bowls of wrath in chapter 15 and 16. And these bowls of wrath have no limit to them. They're going to affect everybody on the earth. All of those who are earth dwellers who follow the dragon, these bowls of wrath are going to be poured out of them. And this signifies then the final judgment. So you can see this interesting pattern. 7, 7, 7, first the seals, then the trumpets, and then out of each of the 7th come then the next series. And you see the picture then of final judgment taking place. So chapter 15 and 16 indicates that final judgment with the 7 bowls of wrath being poured out. In fact, when you have the 7 seals, there's a pause between the 6th and the 7th, a little period of silence or just a pause in which something else takes place before the 7th. Same thing with the trumpets. You get the bowls of wrath pouring out, there's no pause between the 6th and 7th. God's like, done. We're taking it out. There's going to be no more of this. As a matter of fact, I want you to take a look. If you have your Bibles with you, please, just take a look at this passage. The more you're familiar with looking at it in the text, the better off you will be in keeping your understanding together and be able to follow this. But just notice the end of chapter 16 as this 7th bowl of wrath is poured out. Chapter 16, verse 17. Notice the words. The 7th angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." So here's this final judgment idea. And there were flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder and a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. By the way, that little phrase there is this flashes of lightning and the earthquake and all of this is used many, many times. Almost every time you go and see the throne, there's flashes of lightning and earthquake. God's like, I'm upset. And we are going to have a battle going on here. Verse 19, and the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Notice this great city idea. I mentioned that this morning, coming out of Isaiah 24. The great city is our culture throughout the whole world. It's not just, a particular nation or something. So this great city is split, and then the cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. God handing Rome, the prostitute, as she's referred to later in chapter 17, the cup of his wrath, and forcing her to drink it completely so that she gets the full fury of his wrath against her. And then verse 21 verse 20, and every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found, and great hailstones about 100 pounds each fell from heaven on the people, and they cursed God for the plague of the hail, because the plague was so severe. So here it is. He says, it is done. This is it. This is the final judgment. Now when you come to 17 and 18, what you find is there depictions then of Rome finally in her fall. He says, come, let me show you this prostitute. Let me show you what she looks like sitting on the beast. Let me depict her. And so you see these very picturesque ideas of what Rome really looks like. And as I said this morning, the people of that day would have looked at Rome, walked in the city of Rome and went, wow. They would have gone into Philippi that we studied in class this morning and went, wow, look at this great temple to the emperor. They would go around the empire and see all these pictures, and God says, here's the picture. Here's really the ugliness of her. And that is important for us then to keep in mind. And then as you go from there, you see this ultimate victory declared twice. Now I want you to see these two texts that are before you. There's two times where he describes the ultimate victory. The first one is in chapter 11, verse 17 and 18. I'm going to suggest to you that in this case, the ultimate victory is against Israel, is against the holy people. We'll follow up on that in just a moment. It is against Israel, against the holy people. But notice, let's start at verse 16 of chapter 11. And the 24 elders that sit on the thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God, saying, we give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, who is and who was, for you have taken your great power and begun to reign. The nations raged, but your wrath came, and the time of the dead to be judged, for rewarding your servants, the prophets and saints, and for those who fear your name, both small and great, and for destroying the destroyers of the earth. Notice who's being destroyed here, the destroyers of the earth. So in these first number of chapters, chapter 11 actually started with the temple and measuring the temple, protecting those who were righteous, but destroying those who were not, which, as Daniel will tell us, was referring to Israel. Now, why Israel? Because the persecution that we see in the beginning of the book, we'll see it with Smyrna, we see it with Philadelphia, the persecution is from the Jews. And so this culminates in God bringing a judgment on them. And I've jumped ahead a little bit just to throw that out, but I'm going to prove it in just a second. Okay? So you see that final judgment being shown there. And you see in verse 19, again, the flashes of lightning and the rumblings, etc. Now go to chapter 19, and you see again a final judgment is repeated. In this case, 19:1 and 2, after this I heard what seemed to be the loud voice of a great multitude in heaven crying out, Hallelujah! Salvation and glory and power belong to our God, for his judgments are true and just. For he has judged the great prostitute who corrupted the earth with her immorality and has avenged her on the blood of the saints. So in the last part of the book, everything is concentrating from 12 on, is concentrating upon this beast and this prostitute, which he describes as the great city who reigns over the kingdoms of the earth, chapter 17, verse 18. So there is just getting that awareness before you. Now to finish the book, just notice what takes place here. Now we have a great multitude declaring the marriage of the Lamb in chapter 19, verses 6 through 8. And I just mentioned that and had that followed there. Then we see the dragon who followed them cast in the lake of fire, along with all those who follow the dragon. You see that then in chapters 19 and 20. And then in chapter 20, we see a new heavens and a new earth. We see a new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, made ready as a bride. Okay, we, the new Jerusalem, now made ready as a bride for Christ. And then he proclaims in chapter 21, now the dwelling place of God is with men. And then we can easily draw the conclusion he's just wiped out the distinction between heaven and earth. There's no distinction anymore. God has brought heaven down in the sense of the new Jerusalem. And now where's God dwelling? He's dwelling in the new heavens and the new earth. And God has brought us down, came down with us to dwell with us. And he is gone, just as Jesus went away to prepare a place for us. Now that whole place is the heaven that we often talk about, but really it's a molding together of both heaven and earth and bringing all things together. Of course, the old earth is destroyed, new heavens and new earth have been created, and God then brings us into that relationship with Jesus. We see God face to face. Jesus is in our presence, etc. By the way, that fits, and I've mentioned this once before, but that fits the pattern all the way through the Bible. We don't go to God, God comes to us. I always thought that was interesting. I've always struggled with that until I just accepted it. Okay, I'm just going to accept it. When God makes the Garden of Eden, He comes down to dwell with man. And when the Garden of Eden is taken away, He builds the tabernacle where He comes down to dwell with man. Pictures of what He's going to later do. Temple the same way. And then we get to the end. Where's the temple? He comes down and brings and makes this new heaven, new earth. And heaven and earth are blended together and reconciled. All things are blended together. Remember when Jesus prayed in the example prayer? He said, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There's a blending of heaven and earth, bringing it all together. Anyway, interesting little point there. All right, let's stop there. Did better than I thought I would. Only 20 minutes there, that's good. So let's stop. Questions? Anything that you want me to clarify as far as our introduction is concerned? Obviously, when we get a little further here in our studies, we will look at a lot of details of these texts. I'm just giving you big picture. All right. Stop. Bible class time. Questions? Belinda.
I have a question. You were talking about in Luke where Satan offered Jesus all the kingdoms. And then, of course, we're learning that Satan's over the earthly kingdoms. At the same time, we know that God puts rulers in place in earthly kingdoms. So how do you make that work?
Okay, so Belinda's question was, we see Satan saying he has control all of the kingdoms of the earth, and yet we also know that back in passages like Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82, Job chapter 1, that there's evidence that the angels that God sent to rule over nations, they rebelled. So that's the answer, really, is that what God placed over earthly kingdoms. Remember in Daniel, when we studied Daniel 10, and we saw that Daniel was waiting for an answer to his prayer and took 3 weeks for the angel to come. And I always picture him showing up, breathing hard. I came as soon as you prayed, but 3 weeks I went by because the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withholding me, and I couldn't get loose. And it took Michael, the great angel, come and get me loose so that I could come and tell you the answer to the prayer. And after I get done with this, I got to go back and fight with the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And when I'm done with him, I've got to fight with the prince of the kingdom of Greece. See ya. And we all go, what was that? And, well, there's, again, from Psalm 82 and Deuteronomy 32, we don't have time to go into all that, but you see evidence that God placed angels that he referred to as gods in Psalm 82 in the position of bringing his word to them. And Jesus says, in quoting Psalm 82 in John 10, they failed, and he came to fulfill what they did not do, faithfully bringing the word. That's the best I can tell you, is just that Satan did rule them because they caved and followed after God. Okay?
But we also know that God puts in place who he chooses. And that to me is the command.
But he still allows. He allows free will, and he allows Satan to enter the battle. Remember, he could have just, when Satan rebelled, he could have just went, poof. But he's proving something. God is not proving that he's just bigger and better and more powerful. He's proving that he deserves the worship of all creation. And because of who he is and what he's done, which he demonstrates through what he did with Jesus, he proves that he's worthy And that's what you see through the Revelation. Every time you see before the throne, what do you hear him saying? Worthy, 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 holy, holy, holy. Yes, idea. So the question. Oh, Mark.
Explain that there's not two gods because there are two rulers.
Two rulers, but when we think of a despot, we're thinking of somebody who rules for his own desire of power. God is not doing that. God is doing exactly what you do with your children. Somebody else comes along who is evil and wants to influence your children. And this happens to us when our kids get into a little older and they get influenced from various sources and get into teen years and stuff. We become very, very jealous of them. We start, well, whoa, 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 whoa. You do not need to be putting their values over the values that I'm teaching you, and you do not want to think that they love you somehow more than I love you. And that's what God is doing. God is saying, hold it. Satan, are out to destroy my creation. You will absolutely destroy their joy. They'll destroy everything that I have. You will destroy everything that I've done for my people. And so he's jealous for us with a jealous of love, just like a husband would be jealous if someone tries to take his wife away, or vice versa. Make sense? He is doing it for our sake, not because he's just trying to take it. Satan is just, I love power. Satan reminds me of the great dictators of the earth. Hitler, Stalin, Lenin, Saddam Hussein. What are they out for? Are they out for the good of their people? Good grief, no. They're just out for power and wealth. They don't care what happens to their people. Oh goodness, went blank on the great Chinese back in the 80s and stuff. You remember Mao. Thank you, Mao Zedong. Mao starved over 1 million of his people. Starved them to death in order to get the atomic bomb, the atomic weapon, and pay off other nations he took from what his people were doing. Starved 1 million people. Not even counting the people he actually murdered. So this is the kind of individuals you're looking at. What are you seeing with Hamas and all that kind of stuff? You're seeing the exact same kind of thing. They don't care about people. They don't care about anybody but their own power. And they're willing to do anything to have it. So that's the difference I'm talking about. Somebody else? Any other questions? Good. Everybody else is perfectly understanding the beginning of Revelation. I'm glad.
A bit of a response to Melinda's question. I think that's the same issue that we deal with. If you say it's God completely not control all things. And the answer is like, kind of.
Yeah.
He has the power to control all things. He certainly has the ability to order things. He ordered a long series of events that led to Jesus coming and dying in specific ways and doing specific things. But by the same token, even though he can, he clearly does not control all things. Because life would be much different if he did.
Yeah, he allows free will. He allows this. By the way, you bring up a really good point just from this standpoint. Rome boasted in the peace they had brought to the empire. How'd they bring peace to the empire? Yeah, by the sword. That's how they brought it. How did Jesus bring peace? How did Jesus run his kingdom? Laid his life down. He shed his blood in order to bring peace. You see the difference? Major difference. God is saying, no. I'm not like Rome. I am not like any of these nations. I'm not like any of these rulers. Everything I'm doing, I'm laying my life down in order to save my people. And I give up everything I have in order to make that happen. So very important. Good. Chip.
Just to emphasize that, in 1 Corinthians, Paul says, that's why what God did to bring about our reconciliation to God was a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles.
Good thought. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. The way God went about conquering was by laying his life down, by being crucified. And it was a stumbling block to the Jews. They were looking for the God Messiah who came and went, and made them the greatest. And instead he came and allowed them to crucify him in order to save them. And much different. And that's the same reason that it was to the Gentiles, was foolishness. And very opposite of what you're looking for in an earthly ruler or king. And Jesus proved a whole different matter. Brought the world, he drew the world to himself instead of forcing the world to follow him. Much different. Okay? Good. Let's look at this, and I'll make sure we'll have a little discussion about this. Let's look at this next point is, you see in chapter 1, him introducing Revelation with the words. He gave him, in verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants, the things that must soon take place. Verse 3, similar thing, very end, for the time is near. And you're going to see that kind of statement throughout the book. Let's talk a little bit about this time frame. So first question we would say here when he says the things that must soon take place. My first question would be is, how soon you talking about? How near is this? What really is meant when you say that it's going to happen soon, or that that the time is near? You get to the end of the book in chapter 22, he repeats that the time is near and the Lord is coming quickly, and you see a number of statements like that. So the other question that would go along with this is, do you mean that it's soon to take place, that is the beginning of what you're going to do is going to take place soon? Or are you saying everything that you're about to do is going to take place soon? Which one would you take a wild guess would be? Not going to do it. That's right. If I didn't know anything else about the book, my wild guess would be, and I think this is verified by the book, as we'll see in just a second. My wild guess would be that he's not talking about everything he's about to do is going to take place soon, but that this is there is a transition happening right now, and things are going to start changing. I'm going to start doing something in order to bring that about. John. Yeah, sure. Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, there's some things that are going to happen and be completed fairly quickly. There's other things that is going to take a different process. But still, I'm on the job is the idea, and I'm working. And let's just play that out. Let's see if that theory would work in what we see then in the book of Revelation. So go over to Daniel chapter 12. We have to make a comparison here. We made this comparison briefly at the end of our study of Daniel back in December. But let's go back to Daniel chapter 12. Now, some of you I know were not in the Daniel study, so unfortunately, I can't take the time to just give you a summation of all the book of Daniel, but please notice in Daniel 12, verse 1, at that time shall arise Michael the great prince, who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people will be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book of life. Now this time of trouble, Jesus actually quotes that in Matthew 24, referring to the fall of Israel, the destruction of Jerusalem. So you know your time frame already, just looking at Daniel 12. Look down now at verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. Now, note that. Note that if you want to underline in your Bible, there you are. Shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Context of end here is end of Israel. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood, one on this bank of the stream, and one on the bank, that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? Okay, notice the question. How long will it be? Then, verse 7, and I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, he raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and a half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things will be finished. Okay, who's he talking about? Shattering of the holy people. Who's the holy people? Obviously Israel. Now, they're not holy anymore when they get shattered, but that's the way he's referring to them. All right? And I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Notice that. They're sealed. This book is sealed. I'm not going to tell you anymore. It's not going to be till the time of the end that this is going to be revealed. And he then goes on, many will purify themselves, etc., etc. Look then at, just look at verse 13. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest, and you shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. Okay, so all of this mainly talking about, as we saw 12:1 say, the destruction of Israel, the fall of Jerusalem, etc. So notice what we've discovered here. First, the words of the scroll are sealed up until the time of the end. There's some more information Daniel wants. He says, not going to let this be out. You should seal it up, close the book. That's that. Okay, and then he says in verse 13, Daniel, you're going to rest until the end of these days, and you will be fine. Don't worry about yourself. You're righteous, and you don't have to worry. But verses 6 and 7 bring something to our attention. The end of these wonders would be the shattering of the holy people. Did you notice the two angels, one on one bank, one on the other? How long? And an angel above them in the air saying, for time, times, and half a time, which is always a period of trial and difficulty, etc. And then this is going to come about. All right, everybody got this little scene in your mind? All right, so let's transfer now over to Revelation chapter 10. Revelation chapter 10. Beginning at verse 5. You're going to see a lot of similarity here. Verse 5, and he says, by the way, there were 7 thunders who spoke, and he said, don't write it down. And then verse 5, and the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever. Sound familiar? Okay, same thing. Who created heaven and what is in it, and the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay. Okay, what did the angel back in Daniel say? Nah, not happening yet. Seal this up until the time of the end. But this angel says, okay, we're done with the delay. No more delay. Verse 7, but in the days of the trumpet call to be sounded by the 7th angel, the mystery of God will be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants the prophets. Just as he announced to his servants the prophets, as we saw in Daniel chapter 9 and in chapter 12, that there would be the fall of Israel. And he says now the last trumpet call, trumpet sound, is bringing all that to the end, and God's mystery is completed, just as he had said would happen in the prophets. Verse 8, then the voice that I heard from heaven spoke to me again, go take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, take it and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. And I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it, and it was sweet as honey to my mouth. But when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And I was told, watch this, you must again prophesy about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Okay, back in chapter 11, he was talking about the temple of Israel, and he was talking about its destruction, and he was talking about, oh, so now we're switching, and now I'm giving you another little scroll, and you're going to eat it, and you're going to go out and prophesy more about these other nations. So you're transferring to a different part of the book of Daniel. 2 great nations were prophesied of being destroyed in the book of Daniel, right? Israel and Rome. And of course, all the nations before Rome. Those were 2. And he's going to match that then in the book of Revelation. All right, so notice what we have here. Same picture of the angel. There would be no more delay. There was delay in the book of Daniel. It was waiting till the time of the end. The scroll is not sealed. This time it's open to be read and shown to people. All that's taken place, and then you must again prophesy about many peoples, nations, and languages and kings. You prophesied about Israel. Now you're going to prophesy about these other nations, languages, and kings. Okay, so then that brings this question. Here's the scope of our time period as we saw prophesied in Daniel and now bringing about in Revelation. Here's the scope that we're going to see. First and foremost, Daniel 12 talked about the shattering of the holy people of Israel. What year did that take place? Yeah, 70 AD. And 69 to 72, actually, the whole thing, when all of the fortified cities of Israel were destroyed, and then the result of that being the finality of the nation of Israel. And that's when they came to an end as a nation. Okay? So that was fulfilled very soon, wasn't it? Now look at the letters to Smyrna and Philadelphia. Smyrna is in chapter 2 of Revelation. Smyrna is in chapter 2. Notice what he says to Smyrna, chapter 2, and notice verse 9. I know your tribulation and your poverty, that you are rich, and the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Okay, remember in the New Testament, the true Jew is those who follow Christ, and the false Jews are those who do not follow Christ. And so here's who's persecuting Smyrna. It's these false Jews, but it is physical or biological Jews. They're the one persecuting. Now look at chapter 3 concerning Philadelphia. Look at chapter 3 and verse 10. This is really informative here. Chapter 3:10. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth. But back up to verse 9. Behold, I make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Okay, what persecution has already been taking place against both Smyrna and Philadelphia? Persecution by Jews, isn't it? What persecution is yet to come? Verse 10. There's a persecution yet to come that has not come yet at the time of the writing in Revelation. The persecution that will actually try all the coming upon the whole world. Not just this various local areas, but on the whole world, and is going to try those who dwell on the face of the earth. 2 persecutions talked about in Revelation. Those of the Jews, we saw that in Daniel. We see it in the first half of Revelation. Those of the Gentiles, we saw that in Daniel chapter 7, and ultimately in some in Daniel 9, but mainly Daniel 7, where the Christians were persecuted, and we see that in the last half of the book of Revelation. So he's telling us right here, there is persecution that is happening, and there's persecution that is coming. Now you have a context of time period. Everybody understand that? We good? Okay, follow up then, as we've seen here, for future persecution. Now, in chapter 10, verse 5 through 11, these judgments are concluded on Israel, at least in a prophetic way. They're concluded on Israel. I read that this morning in chapter 11 and also here in this text. So they're concluded on Israel, and then we go from there, and he speaks in chapter 10, verse 11, as we just read, there'll be later judgments about peoples and nations and languages and kings. Here, John, you're going to now tell more about peoples, nations, languages, and kings. Okay, now here's then going back to answer the question. How soon is soon? Well, Jerusalem, as John said, that's pretty soon. When was Revelation written? Well, nobody knows for exact sure. And there's different beliefs and stuff on it. I would suggest that we're probably looking at somewhere around 68, 69 BC, but that's AD. But that's not significant for us right now. We just know that he's talking about something that we know happened quite soon. Rome, when did Rome fall? Well, that's a bit later. 200-300 years takes place. And Daniel foretold of the fall of Rome in Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. After Rome destroyed Israel, he said the destroyer was going to be destroyed. So now how long is soon? So you see how it's going to happen. The beginnings are going to happen right away, very, very quickly. But there's a process by which this is coming. God is beginning to act, is the idea. So this brings about a caution when you're reading time markers, especially in apocalyptic type literature. Give you a couple examples. How long was it going to be in Daniel 9:24 from the time that the call went out to rebuild the temple until Jerusalem was going to be destroyed and Rome, the destroyer, was going to be destroyed? How long was that going to be? Well, in Daniel it said 70 weeks. We can look back and go, oh, well, we can figure that out. 70 weeks, well, it's not literal, because even if I took 70 weeks as 70 years, 70 times 70, you're going to go, wait a minute, that's 490 years, that's not enough years. Actually, it covers over 600 years, 70 weeks. You see, what would you think if you were living in Daniel time and the prophet says it's going to be 70 weeks? You go, okay, well, let me count my weeks here. This is about a year and a half. No, it's not. So we have to be careful how these words are used in apocalyptic literature. The church at Smyrna is told you're going to suffer persecution 10 days. Piece of cake, 10 days. Well, it's going to be a little bit longer than that. As a matter of fact, this is a figure of speech of what is going on here. In Haggai chapter 2, verse 6 through 9, when he's talking about the fall of Israel and ultimately the rebuilding of God's new temple, he says, yet once more in a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land. Well, Haggai was around 625 BC. How long? See what I mean? And then this passage is actually quoted in Hebrews 12, and he says, I'm going to shake the heavens and the earth again. And he refers to this passage, and it's going to be in a little while. So, well, how do you deal with that? How do you handle that? And this is what I would suggest. Here's two messages that these time markers send us. And don't worry about length of time, but worry about this. God is saying the turning point is at hand. I am on the ball here, and I'm about to act. And there's not going to be delay. I am going to do what I promised I would do. And secondly, when it feels like that the world is in absolute chaos, turned upside down, and there's no one in control, These passages tell us God has an orderly time frame in which he will eventually judge the world and bring restoration to everything that had been destroyed by Satan. Louder, please. Yes, the restoration of all things will happen at the end of time. Acts chapter 3, verse 19 through 21 will state that when Jesus returns, he will then restore all things. So yeah, restoration is in process, but it will be completed when Jesus returns. Okie doke. A lot of information, soaked your brain. Maybe your brains are scrambled right at this point. But we're introducing some things. We can now step back and start looking at the text and fitting these things now. This is what I hope to do. When we were on vacation in December, I don't know how many times Brent and April and the kids pulled out a jigsaw puzzle. And I always put, one of the next to last puzzle pieces in just to say that I participated. But what do you do first? Well, you make the border. That's where you start. And so that's what I hope to do today. Let's get a border in. We've got some kind of border so that we have a relationship to what's going to go in the middle of the puzzle. Thank you for your kind attention and what your dedication to this. I appreciate it. I know God appreciates it, especially. He wrote it. We're going to sing a song right now. If we can help you in any way, please let that be known while together we stand and while we sing.